everyone, and welcome to the Lesbian Talk Show. This is For Love and Money with Rae Online, and today's guest is soon-to-be PhD Brianna Dym from the University of Colorado Boulder. So I brought you on today to talk about a very specific topic that has actually impacted my career as an author and my advertising methods. I wanted to talk about the website Tumblr and its recent decision as a blogging platform to ban all not safe for work content entirely. So, could you tell us what you know about Tumblr and how it got to this point?
So, first of all, I just want to clarify some things. Tumblr is banning adult content, quote unquote. And I am specifying that because words matter, especially when it comes down to information and categorization. And what's going on with Tumblr is a classic categorization problem. They announced this change on December 3rd of 2018, so last week. And they announced the change sort of because they got taken down from the iTunes store, and they were taken down because there was child pornography on the site. And they always had a no tolerance policy on child pornography. They just didn't enforce it as well as they could. But hearsay is that Tumblr has been planning to roll out a ban on adult content for a while. What they stated is that starting December 17th, they will begin enforcing this policy. The problem is no one's really received any notice that their blogs have been flagged or their posts have been flagged as explicit. I've talked to a lot of community members, and some people have blogs with like tens of thousands of posts on them. So it's very, very difficult to go through and find that content that's been marked as explicit.
I have 18,000 posts to my name on my Tumblr, and I have been muted in certain tags because my content is considered explicit, but I have no clue which posts are and which posts aren't and why.
It's a black box algorithm, which means that nobody really knows how it works except for the people at Tumblr. I want to get back a little bit more to like defining words though, because that's a really important thing going on here. So adult content is what's banned. And you might be wondering, okay, what does that actually mean? What does that phrase mean? According to Tumblr's official site, adult content primarily includes photos, videos, or GIFs that show real life human genitals or female presenting nipples, and any content including photos, videos, GIFs, and illustrations that depict sex acts. Now, a lot of people are getting flagged and marked as explicit, even though they might have only artistic drawings of stuff that's sexual in nature on their blog. I believe that your blog, Rae, had mostly written erotica on it and a few like illustrations of sexual content that were fan arts for the most part.
Yeah.
So clearly, what they're defining as adult content is broader than what is written in their official statement. And that's a problem. That's where a lot of confusion is coming in. Because clearly what's stated in their official statement is not matching up with what's happening in real life as they roll this out. Furthermore, they say that what is freely permitted are female presenting nipples that are in connection with breastfeeding, birth, or afterbirth moments and health-related situations such as post-mastectomy or gender confirmation surgery, which is just kind of bullshit because women's breasts shouldn't be sexualized like that. They also state that written content such as erotica, nudity related to political or newsworthy speech, and nudity found in art such as sculptures or illustrations are also stuff that can be freely posted on Tumblr. And, you know, they rolled out their algorithm and it immediately started hitting a lot of false flags. You know, it was flagging art left and right. It was flagging stuff that didn't even make sense to be flagged. And furthermore, whatever they've done to enforce this ban has completely broken the site. I can't search for half the posts on my blog, and I almost never reblogged anything that was not even just drawings of artfully naked people. So no one knows what's happening. And when no one knows what's happening, you can't respond or continue to function. You know, Tumblr staff have said, you know, we don't want queer people and we don't want, they said they don't want queer people to leave. They don't want communities about sex to leave. They don't want any of that to happen. But the problem is the way that Tumblr is functioning right now and what they have done, that adult content ban, it means that Tumblr is no longer a home for any of this stuff. They've killed these communities, whether they intended to or not.
So, one thing that I found interesting is how they're trying so hard, like you said, to say we don't want queer people to leave. We want this to be a home for you. And yet, when you go in the tags, I know for a fact because I tried it for a while. Tags like bisexual and lesbian were just gone.
Are they back now?
So they weren't permanently gone, but like if you're considering people's identities to be adult content, which it seems like some of Tumblr's black box algorithm is, then that's a really serious problem because our society sexualizes queer people in this really fetishistic and harmful way.
And yeah, that's exactly part of the problem. But another part of the problem is that queer communities need to have some queer communities need to have some level of sexual exploration allowed because we don't have anywhere else to do it. This is the only place on the internet where queer people were allowed to safely explore their sexuality on their own terms. Women too, straight and gay women, women of all shapes and sizes, were allowed to explore themselves as sexual beings without the pornography industry or the male gaze dictating how they do so. And I think that's something that Tumblr allowed for in a lot of really amazing ways. And so by banning adult content, you're also banning those expressions and those explorations, and they can't exist on your site anymore. No matter what you try to do, those rules are still in place, and that you can't roll them back. And Tumblr's black box algorithm, I've been poking into the source code a little bit, and you can't change anything on it. Like, you can change Tumblr's banner to say penis instead for like just your page and no one else's page. But that's all you can really do with the source code. I found a query at the bottom of the source code that basically just says, is the search that you just typed in not safe for work? And it'll say either true or false. And if it's true, you don't get any search results coming back. And if it's false, you get search results. So if you follow that query up, you see that there is a model that the tag is being run through. And if the model has determined that that search query is not safe for work, then it gets marked as true. Now, the problem is we don't know how that model is determining what is and is not explicit because it's a black box. And like, so I'm guessing, like wildly speculating, that what's happening is that this model is going through all the posts that are tagged a certain thing, and it's looking at them and it's applying whatever algorithm they have to say, like, are there titties present? Are they sexy titties? And it's ranking that in terms of like, does it meet a certain threshold to be marked as bad? And tags like lesbian or bisexual, when that model was initially rolled out, probably pinged its sensors because you probably had a lot of people tagging for sexual content in those tags.
It seems like they should have gone in and manually made sure.
Well, they did that after the fact because those tags have come back now, right?
Yes, but why didn't they do it before they released this? It's like they released it like haphazardly because they were afraid of Apple and what's the new law that they passed?
FOSTA SESTA.
FOSTA SESTA. That's fun to say.
That's the abbreviation to it.
Not fun that it is passed, but fun to say.
Yeah, it was a law designed to curb sex trafficking, but it's aimed at fighting online sex trafficking, and especially aimed at like helping minors. But it's also not a well-designed act because it was sort of cobbled together by people who don't necessarily understand how the internet actually works.
It's my understanding that they made it so you can hold websites that have illegal content legally accountable in terms of fines and such, even if they were not aware this content was on their platform and had taken steps to guard against it.
Exactly. It kills any amount of risk that the website is willing to host and running itself. Sex trafficking is terrible. Child pornography is terrible. We need to do things to stop these things from happening. But attacking a fine, illegal fine or legal accountability onto a specific website isn't necessarily the immediate direction to go. There's other ways to go about doing that.
The risk that a company takes just by allowing any not safe for work content their shareholders might decide is too much, and then you only end up with not safe for work content on like Pornhub, which is not safe or welcoming for women and queer people.
Exactly. That the law conflates not safe for work content with sex trafficking. And so how you start to piece apart those two problems is one piece of it. But Tumblr's policy, like its problem is that it is messy. It's this algorithm is hitting false positives left and right, and there is nothing Tumblr can do, as much as it wants to fix this. I am 100% convinced, because I don't think Tumblr is going to come out and say, you know what, never mind, we're not going to ban this. And that is literally the only thing that they could do at this point. Because when you get rid of adult content, you get rid of a very important avenue of people's voices that they had on this site.
I know that it's going to affect my voice and my ability to share my work. My Twitter following is not nearly as vast as my Tumblr following. And it's going to be a challenge to rebuild like my mailing list, my Twitter, my Facebook, and these other social media avenues to make up for it. Because I've just lost thousands of followers who, I mean, assuming my blog doesn't get muted or deleted or purged, they're just not going to be on Tumblr anymore. They went to Tumblr to look at porn and to connect with other queer people. And if there's no porn and there's no queer people, they're not going to be there to see my updates.
Yeah, and not just porn, like just erotic art, erotic stories. And I think there's also some like fallacy whenever people talk about this Tumblr issue. Oh, if they just get rid of the porn, then the problem will be gone. And it's like, people do have a right to enjoy sexuality and to look at this stuff. Sex trafficking is the problem, but porn is not the problem. Like, I don't know how to better state that. Like, those two things are separate, and I think we conflate them whenever we talk about what's going on with Tumblr.
You're listening to The Lesbian Talk Show. TheLesbianTalkShow.com, your hub of podcast information.
So, okay, this is my big question for you now is the era of Tumblr is coming to an end. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion now. Where are people going to go next? Where are these artists and writers and these queer people, these sex positive people going to land? These fandom people, these refugees?
So Pillow Fort was looking like it would be a good space, but Pillow Fort is also struggling to do the uptake. They honestly just don't have the server capacity to deal with the massive influx of people from Tumblr. So Pillow Fort's not going to be the number one home for people right away. A lot of people have been using Twitter as an interim space. A lot of people have been making their own private Discords and fleeing to different Discord communities. And a lot of people have been going back to Dreamwidth or some other LiveJournal replacement sites that were made after LiveJournal was bought out by the Russians. But those sites never got popular because Tumblr had come along. I think the community will not homogenize and gather in the same place for a very long time. I think that we don't have any really robust sites to immediately uptake people. We only have sites that can host small amounts of people. For like Twitter is there, and Twitter has everyone on it, but people don't use Twitter for fandom for a lot of reasons. It's just how Twitter is designed, and it's how Twitter functions. I don't see fandom taking root on Twitter. And aside from that, there's no other major players in the sites that will successfully adopt all of like these millions of people that are like leaving in this max exodus from Tumblr. I think over the next 2 years or so, people are just going to be siloed into separate groups, and then eventually a site will get its footing and sort of become the Tumblr replacement, whether that is Pillow Fort or Dreamwidth or somewhere else. People will eventually migrate back to that one homogenous space. It's just going to take a little bit of time, because there's no site that was immediately prepared to suck people up from Tumblr. Because if a site had been, people would have already been on it, because a lot of folks hated how Tumblr functioned.
So if a site were to rise from the ashes and meet the needs of fandom, how would you like to see it designed to be more stable and more secure and allow these artists to flourish?
Well, I think Pillow Fort has some good ideas in that there's sub-community controls and you have a lot of control over your individual privacy. Um, I also think Pillow Fort doesn't have the money to host all the content of visuals and videos and GIFs and all that. So I'd like to see a site that has fandom's values baked into it in its design. I think so. Feminist HCI is this sort of idea in my field of study where it's feminist human-centered computing. It's this idea that like you build a technological thing, um, like the actual users who are going to use it build it, and they build their own values into it by just by the virtue of they're the ones making it, and they also like build certain forms and ways of functioning into it just because it's the community that's going to use it. Archive of Our Own is a textbook example of feminist HCI. So if a site were to come along to replace Tumblr as fandom's like artist and social space, I think it would be really cool to see it built by fandom again because Archive of Our Own has been such a huge success.
Could you talk a little bit about the Organization for Transformative Works and AO3 and just very briefly what those are for listeners who might not have heard of them before?
So, Archive of Our Own is a massive fanfiction repository that was originally coded entirely by a team of women. Those women were all in fanfiction communities that got kicked off of LiveJournal in what was called the strike through. A lot of communities featuring adult content were banned. And so everyone was like, we need a place of our own. We need an archive of our own to host our fanfiction. And so Naomi Novik, she's public about this. She was someone in fandom at the time, Naomi Novik being a famous sci-fi / fantasy writer, put out this call for everyone to sort of like rally together and build their own archive online to host fan fiction. And they did it, and Archive of Our Own is wildly successful. It is the premier site for hosting fan fiction, and it does not censor what is posted there. They allow what is legal. They drew the line at legality, which is unpopular with a lot of people, but it still works. They also baked in a content warning system into the site, which is one of the most successful content warning systems I've ever seen implemented. And they are also part of a nonprofit group called the Organization for Transformative Works, which hosts their own journal and also employs lawyers to help fan creators continue to make their work without being threatened by copyright owners. It's a really incredible place, and it's all entirely run by fan volunteers, people from fandom who are volunteers. It's a really excellent resource for the queer community, for women who don't see themselves represented in television, for all sorts of marginalized people. Organization for Transformative Works is also a really big proponent for accessibility and designing for accessibility from the ground up, which is why Archive of Our Own functions the way it does in a lot of ways, is that it was designed to be accessible from day one for a lot of people who have different for a lot of people who are differently abled in how they have to access internet content.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this with us. It's a really important issue. It's an issue that affects my livelihood, and I'm really grateful to know an academic who is basically one of the world experts on fandom communities and where they live. Because where they live is where my readers are.
Yeah, I was so honored to be able to speak to this. Thank you so much for having me on, and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you so much. This was the Lesbian Talk Shows for Love and Money with Rae Magden and special guest Brianna Dym. Today, we talked about the implementation of Tumblr's adult content ban and the impact it has on writers, artists, and other creative people, including marginalized communities. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.